I'd much rather you be 80% on for the rest of your life than flip-flop between 100% and 20%.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. As always, I'm Courtney, and this is my brother, Paris. And the podcast didn't stop. We still had our weekly releases, but we haven't actually recorded in a few weeks because I was traveling. So it feels nice to be back and sitting across from you virtually, but doing this and filming again, recording again. It's awesome.
I agree. I'm glad we prepped ahead of time, though, so we didn't miss a beat. But it is good to be back in action. And check this out.
Something major changed while I was away.
I finally hung up. We have a Team Truth sign that I got for my birthday a couple of years ago from Courtney and Pam. Mm-hmm. And I had it in my old office, but then when I moved, it was on my to-do list. I'm not typically a procrastinator, but for some reason, I had not checked that off my list of to-dos for so long. And then I was walking past the dollar store and I was like, I just need to get these damn hooks and finally hang up the sign. And would you look at that? The Team Truth sign is up and it looks absolutely fantastic, if I do say
I love it. I think the whole podcast visuals, I know some people listen just audio, but know that the visuals are translating through the audio stream as well. The Team Truth vibes are real.
Totally. There we go.
Absolutely. Team Truth, anybody who knows anything about Team Truth is that our brand philosophy is oriented around sustainability. And Paris, you and I even start this podcast every week with sustainable fitness transformation being part of our intro, right? And one of the things that really, really gets in the way of that sustainability, whether that's sustainable progress or long-term success or just long-term confidence, is the all or nothing mindset. And I'll actually go so far as to say, even if you're somebody who doesn't care about the long term, which you should, but even if you don't, it also stops you from making short-term immediate progress. Oftentimes, we see it time and time again, whether that's with the people that we speak to and they don't work with us, but we just have conversations about fitness, or honestly, even with clients, it's a mindset that we work through a lot, time and time again.
Totally.
So the all or nothing mindset, before we define what it is, do you have a perspective on it overall and how it affects progress?
I think it definitely is one of the most common mindsets that I find that holds people back. And I always say, I'd much rather you be 80% on for the rest of your life than flip-flop between 100% and 20%.
Yeah. The average of that is still less than 80%, by the way, if you're flip-flopping between 100 and 20. If we want to do the numbers and make it a numbers game. Right? Yeah. So today we really want to actually dive into that mindset, talk about what it is and how it actually shows up, the real experiences we've had of seeing that all or nothing mindset in practice. And then also why it is an actual issue and why it's not necessarily going all in isn't always the badge of honor that I think a lot of fitness people or fitness enthusiasts think that it is. So we're going to debunk that a little bit too, and then talk in the end about how we can reframe that to make it more productive.
Totally. And first, let's kind of say what is the all or nothing mindset, right? I think it's when you're either fully all in, everything is quote unquote perfect, or it's a complete opposite of that. Okay, so what this might look like is when you're okay, you know what? I'm going to commit to transforming my body. And then you're in the gym 6 times a week. You're doing an hour of cardio after that. You're following a super rigid meal plan. You don't miss. You don't eat a single meal out. It's everything's like that. Then you go from that to no training, Uber eating 4 times a week, eating ice cream every single night and a whole pizza to yourself on the weekend. And it's what a complete contrast. And I feel it's such a sucky place to be if you're flip-flopping between those two, because you really won't get anywhere. And the thing is, you're always going to think you have to be quote unquote suffering or perfect to make progress. And you're either suffering and making progress, or you are not making any progress and kind of going completely off the rails.
Yeah. The one thing I think is interesting about that is that you kind of use these examples of behaviors to represent that, right? It's either you're doing this or that. And it's really you either are doing the things that you think are completely productive towards fitness, or the things that you think are unproductive towards fitness. But the key word there is think, right? Sometimes it actually doesn't even matter what those behaviors are. You can eat ice cream and be making progress towards your fitness goals and not have an all or nothing mindset. But the challenge is that you're making a mental decision to choose behaviors that you believe either are all in on your goals or are completely not supportive of your goals. And that's also why we often see the yo-yo dieting concept, right?
Yes.
And we did a full episode on that too. But I think yo-yo dieting is one of the biggest representations of the all or nothing mindset. It is defined by that flip-flopping. It is the flip-flopping between different ways of thinking about your goals And then that translates into completely differentiated and polarizing behaviors. Mm-hmm. So if you are thinking either I'm all in on my goals or I'm going to put off on this, then you inherently do different behaviors as a result. So it's not actually the behaviors themselves that make it all or nothing. It's the fact that your mental commitment to your goals either becomes I'm perfect about it, which sometimes isn't even actually that productive or perfect to begin with.
Yeah.
Or this is on pause. I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's exhausting. I honestly do think, and we talked about this on the yo-yo dieting podcast, but losing the same fat over and over again and gaining it back is exhausting because then you're essentially chronically in a state of diet or trying to diet, right? And the kind of, I guess, kind of like negative mindset that you can get in as well, because you feel down on yourself when you gain the weight back, and then you're like, oh well, now I got to get back in it, and it feels really tough, and then you give up, and then it's this cycle, and it's really bad for your mental state, regardless of you spinning your wheels in terms of progress. It's also bad for your
I think you kind of end up in no man's land, because when you're all or nothing, you're neither, right? Like you actually kind of be defined by like nothing consistent, nothing status quo. You have no, this is just how I exist, because you're constantly doing that flip-flopping. So I'm going to go deep for a second, comes a bit of an identity crisis. Where are you in the middle of that all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that not having an actual definition of this is what I do is a key like red flag of the all or nothing mindset, right? And we see it time and time again flare up when it's like, I'm going to start again on Monday, right? Oh, I'll just start again on Monday. It's like that delaying that identity decision, right? Or even I think some people will be like, oh, I'll go to the gym every single day, and then they have one off day, and then you don't go for 3 months, right? And that actually doesn't even matter if it's like, okay, you gain the fat back or not. Like sometimes it's not even about the outcomes that flip flop. It's actually just about like your perspective on I know what to do or I'm doing the thing is the thing that's flip flopping.
Yes. And we inherently know that this is not a good way to go for other things in life. But then for some reason in our fitness journey, we fall into these mindsets. Like imagine if you were working a job and you didn't show up for 3 months and then you worked like 14 hours for the next 2 months. Like that wouldn't make any sense, right? But then why do we do that in one way, shape, or form in our fitness journey? Or it's like, okay, I'm not going to take my wife on a date or for like the next like 4 months, but then I'm going to ask her to go on a date every single night for like 2 months. It's like, well, why didn't we just do like one night a week forever? Like wouldn't that make a lot more sense? So we inherently can look at it in other aspects of life and be like, nah, that would be dumb. But then in our fitness journey, we for some reason think like this is the best idea ever.
It's so true. It's the flip-flopping that we live with in fitness has, I think, just become so normal. Like so many people live by that being their version of normal, right? And I think part of it is actually the high achieving desire with fitness. And I think it represents how deeply people actually want their fitness goals. I'm going to sit with that for a second. Bear with me. Your fitness is so personal, and so are your relationships. So is your job, by the way. But I think people do see fitness through a slightly different lens, where high achievers often have expectations of themselves of doing the thing perfectly, right? And when you want something so bad, we often find ourselves like wanting it equals a desire for perfection. The more we want something, the more we strive for perfection with it. And I see that time and time again. And I've experienced that mentality myself too, right? But when you want something so badly and you're chasing the perfect version of it, it does set you up for that all or nothing thinking, right? Because you don't know how to have it when it's not perfect. And that's the challenge people have, is they don't know what it looks like to miss a workout and, go back the next day. What do I do? Sometimes it's just like, I don't know what to do, or I'm not going to make the progress. Therefore I might as well not do it. Right. It's not seeing, it's seeing that perfection really does become the enemy of the good in when it comes to fitness.
Yeah. And what is perfect anyways in fitness? And a lot of times when people are quote unquote all in, a lot of the stuff they're doing is just fluff. That's just making it harder than it needs to be. Like, for example, the example with the that I gave earlier with the six days a week of cardio, like it's completely unnecessary for the majority of people, but you feel like you're doing more. You know what I mean? And I feel like, not to give another analogy, but like, let's say you didn't write a test unless you knew that you were going to get 100% on the test. But you're like, I'm not going to show up to take the exam because I can't get, I don't think I'm going to get 100. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever. You immediately
fail by default.
But if you could go and write and get 80%, then it's like, okay, that's a pretty good mark. So I think we need to start to think of our fitness journey, as I always say, as more of a dimmer switch and not as a light switch, where instead of on or off, we're just adjusting the setting of the dimmer up or down. Sometimes it's brighter, sometimes it's dimmer, but it's still on. Yeah.
I really like what you said about how the stuff can be fluff when you're all in. Being all in doesn't actually add more value when the things you're all in on are either misaligned with your goal, extra fluff, requiring more effort than necessary, past the point of diminishing returns, right? So I think you really do need to ask yourself, what are you actually all in on? And if you want that mindset to be productive for you, it's like doing the things that have the most impact to your fullest capacity. That's being all in a productive way. But being all in a way where you're just doing more things just because, or somebody told you whatever, or like because it makes you feel like you're doing more, but you're actually not doing better, then in that case, the all or nothing mindset isn't just unproductive because there's a nothing attached to the other side of it, but because going all in might be taking more energy and effort than it's actually giving you back.
Yeah. Yeah. And when people go for that perfectionist type mindset, usually they get caught up in the tiny details that don't matter, where they should really just focus on like, what are the major needle movers for this process? And I think if I kind of take a step back and think about the people who have really made great progress over the long run and continue to make progress over time, they know what are the few key things they need to check in terms of boxes, and they just completely exploit that. And then they don't worry about all this etc. stuff that's like little tiny details that don't really matter. But when we're in that perfectionist mindset, it's like we're worrying about these tiny things that are just causing more stress than anything. And maybe that's the reason why it's unsustainable to stick with in the first place.
Yeah. And I think then when you finally decide to let go of those things that don't matter, because you've convinced yourself they matter, then you fall into the nothing. Right? Because you're like, oh, these little things, like you've become so fixated on them by going all in. Then you're like, well, that matters. You convince yourself they matter. So when they are not there, you don't actually realize you're totally fine. But all of a sudden you're like, I'm nothing now. I'm in the nothing. Right? But I want to, if you don't mind, I know we've kind of started to explore like how the perfectionist mindset can really impact all or nothing, but I'd love to touch on another reason why the all or nothing mindset is so much more prevalent in fitness than in other aspects of life. Right? And to me, it's because so much of the fitness industry has created a sense of things are dichotomous. Things are inherently this or that. It's black or white. It's on, off. It's good, bad. And that's not what sustainable fitness is at all. So like, that's one of the biggest lies the industry has told. And it starts with food. It's good or bad. So if you do this, you're either on track or you're off track if you don't do this. And that is so unproductive. But I think that is one of the root causes of why we see the all or nothing mentality flare up so much.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I think people to blame are the people putting out information, right? Because they kind of know what people want to watch and hear. And to get more views, they'll say stuff like, oh, these are the 5 worst foods to eat in a fat loss phase, because they know it's going to get views, when in reality, like context is everything and there's no such thing as a bad food, you know? So it's, yeah. So anyways, we need to do better as an industry, I think, to help, lessen this likelihood of on or off thinking. But yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. Fitness is not that dichotomous though in practice, right? Like to make that continued progress, it's not about always being on or always being off. It's about just creating different definitions around what it means to be committed and connected and continue making progress, because progress itself isn't dichotomous, right? Let's say in fitness, we're always chasing some form of progress. It doesn't matter what your goal is, you're working towards something. If that's just continuous improvements in your physique, if that's consistent behaviors and consistent habits, if that's building up confidence, whatever it is that's your barometer of progress, that isn't something that's either checked off or not. You know what I mean? So fitness actions and fitness mindset need to also really reflect the fact that things are continuous. And one thing I come back to time and time again is starting to see things as a spectrum, right? And I think we can make more progress or less progress, and we can go faster or slower, and we can make decisions that have more impact or less impact towards our goals. But at the end of the day, I think one of the key things to start bringing that all or nothing mindset is, how do you start to see your fitness goals, the habits behind them, and your mindset around them as a spectrum? And we could totally visualize this if we want to. You draw a line and you start to map things out against that, left to right.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the dimmer switch analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time as well. And I think if we start to think about it more like that, instead of thinking, oh, I had a bad day, it's more like, hey, this was just not as good of a day for progress.
Not as
right?
productive.
Not as productive, because some people will, let's say you accidentally overate by 200 calories and you're in a fat loss phase. And then they're like, well, screw it. Now I'm just going to have 800 more calories. It's like, well, we could have just had a day where you were in a slight deficit instead of a larger deficit for fat loss. But now we became into a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we could have had a day that was just, maybe not as quick of a rate of progress or fat loss, but still progressing and moving forward. And we turned that into, now we took a step back just because of we're being in that all or nothing thinking.
Yeah. And it's like trying to figure out where on that spectrum you're actually sitting versus more you might want to be. Because sometimes you also don't want to be at 100%. Sometimes you make conscious decisions to be at 80% because whatever that 20% delta is worth the trade-off. Like I had a client tell me this morning in her check-in, she's like, I think I've started to find that happy medium. She's like, I've started to find that happy medium where like enjoyment isn't the alternative to my goals. The two things coexist. So in my response, I was actually drawing out the spectrum, being like, okay, if our happy medium sits somewhere here, there's going to be decisions where we fall on to the left of that happy medium. There's also decisions where we fall to the right of that happy medium, right? And so like actually identifying for yourself, okay, where am I? And where do I want to be? And sometimes you don't want to be at 100%. And most of the time you also don't want to be at 0%.
Yeah. Yeah, because there are some things that maybe the juice is just not worth the squeeze based on your priorities and your life chapter and the way your lifestyle's set up.
Circumstances, scenario.
Exactly. So I think it's really important to kind of just choose where you want to be on that spectrum and acknowledge like, okay, what are the behaviors that I need to do to like, slide up or down that. But yeah.
And one of the things that we often don't think enough about is what's the alternative? Meaning, okay, so I maybe made this decision that, hey, it could have been better. I'm not happy with the fact that I didn't make the perfect choice or the most productive decision. But you made a decision that could also not be the quote unquote worst decision either, right? So let's say we're going to talk about food choices for a second. Let's say you're like, you know what? I ordered a burger and I had bacon on it and I ordered a side of fries. Okay, maybe if you are somebody who's trying to moderate your calorie intake, maybe that wasn't the most productive choice at the restaurant. But hey, if you check the menu and you could have made an alternative choice that was an extra 500 calories, or you didn't order the milkshake to go with it, or whatever it is, you also have to acknowledge that you made certain decisions that were more productive than they could have otherwise been. And like you said, Paris, right? Okay, maybe you overate by 200 calories versus your target, but you didn't overeat by 800 calories. It's more productive than it could have otherwise been. But we never address that there's a counterfactual version of reality. And I think when you come to terms with the fact that, okay, I could have made a decision that made me feel more off track or more unproductive, then you start to realize you're further on that spectrum than maybe you thought you were.
Yeah, and I also think as you mature in your fitness journey, you start to judge yourself less for not being perfect. And you also realize that it matters less and less. Because as we talked about before, over the long run, the people that do the best have those big rocks, like, well established, but then they don't worry about all the little details. And I think when you know what really matters and you remove all the stuff that doesn't matter or matters much less, then it reduces some stress, and it also allows you to see things a little bit differently, I would say, overall.
I think you've also, like, at that point, you've made so many quote unquote deposits. Like the longer you actually stay in it doing something, you have deposits that create compound interest, right?
Yeah.
But when you spend more time being in that all or nothing thinking, the nothing side of things is like draining your bank account, right? Versus all of it is being like, okay, I'm all my chips, I'm going all in. It's like, I'm going to use a bad analogy for a second. It's like if you're like, I'm going to go all in on Bitcoin, that's it. And then like Bitcoin crashes, it's worth zero. You pull all your money out, you've got nothing, right? But if you're like, okay, well, I've made all these deposits, I'm just going to let them, in maybe like, I don't know, ETFs, or I've just invested in the market and I'm going to see what happens, balanced portfolio. And maybe it's not the same as having this major investment up front, but you also don't have the risk of it crashing out on you. So you just continue to make your daily deposits, and those will compound interest. Those will pay you back in the long term. But two things have to be true. One is you have to be comfortable making smaller initial investments potentially. And you have to be willing to stay in it longer.
Yes. Yeah. The time, you have to extend your time horizon. Like, if you keep extending your time horizon, all the things that you freak out about of, oh, it wasn't perfect, tend to just come out in the wash. Right?
Yeah.
Like, let's get real here. Like, do I remember the one time I accidentally had extra 300 calories in 2021? Like,
no.
Who cares?
And also, did
right?
that impact the way you look and feel today? No.
Exactly. But in the moment, we think of these things as such a big deal. And then that leads to the spiral of then self-sabotage a lot of times. It's like, if we can't be perfect, then why are we not even trying? But that's such a flawed mindset to begin with.
Yeah. And I just want to share another example that happened today in a different client's check-in. She was frustrated that last week, she said it felt misaligned with her goals, some of last week's choices. Okay. So she told me that, and I was looking at her numbers and looking at her sheets, looking at her food logs, and I'm saying, you know what? Okay, maybe there were 1 or 2 days that were higher calories, but her average for the week, and okay, there was maybe let's say there was a little bit of a margin of error or variance with tracking with certain meals out and other things like that and estimating. But her average for the week was still in a good spot. And so I was like, sometimes those things feel heavier than they actually are. So instead of letting those short moments spiral you into all or nothing, you actually have to say, like, on average or for this week, I'm still heading in the direction that I want to go. I'm still actually, the directionality is still there.
Yes. The more you zoom out, the less you should be freaking out.
But if you do zoom out,
so you don't freak out.
Yeah. If you zoom out, so you don't freak out. I like that. Can you say that again? That was catchy.
Zoom out so you don't freak out.
Sounds better in your voice. That's great. Yeah. But if you zoom out and your graph looks like your metaphorical graph or hypothetical graph looks like sound waves, just completely up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, like frequency, right? Then that is telling you something about your directionality, which if you take the line of best fit, I'm nerding out for a second. If you take the line of best fit of the graph, it's completely flat. So again, doesn't matter what measure of progress is, but the all or nothing mindset is keeping you stuck if your line of best fit is completely flatlined.
Yeah.
Versus daily deposits, compound interest, breaking through that. Okay.
Can I play devil's advocate and maybe say, when could there be a scenario where being
for
all
sure
in?
We always want to present those scenarios. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I do think, yes, the all or nothing mindset is obviously, not the best way to go, but sometimes having the all mindset can be very positive for you. As long as you don't have the nothing on the other end of it, the first half of it can actually be like, if you make the decision, you say, you know what, I've been stuck for way too long. I've been making maybe okay progress or just stagnant with my progress, but I do really care about this thing and I'm going to go all in once and for all. I think making that decision and having that all portion of the journey helps you just kickstart momentum. And even if you're not perfect, like later down the line, if at the beginning you're just going all in, then you have the room for flexibility later because you have so much inertia and so much momentum that those little wiggles and flexibility aren't going to impact anything because you've established it at the beginning. So I think sometimes in a journey, it is good and important to have that let's go all in mindset.
I think especially if you do get some validation. If you get some validation of like, okay, I went all in and something happened. Oh, I got proof I can do this. If that actually keeps you in it, that's the goal, right? Yeah. It's just making sure that you're not going all in on the things that, one, have no impact towards your goals or two, require more energy than they pay you back, or three, completely burn you out and can't be repeated. Because that's where the nothing then falls out. The rebound happens, right? But absolutely, if you can pick the right things, pick the most productive things, go all in on them and see what happens, you will get more validation from that more often than just, okay, I'll just keep doing very small things and see what happens, right? You'll get quicker validation.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with that, it is kind of cool, but I think you just need to understand, like, what is your inherent nature too? Because some people can't go all in and not do the nothing.
Go all out. Yeah.
Right? Some people can't. Like, I know people who just, like, they'll go all in and they'll see the positive results and it's, everyone can point at them and be like, amazing, look how well you're doing. But there is always a nothing that comes in response, right? So I think you really have to know your own psychology and your own patterns.
Yes, self-awareness. And when we talk about making progress, right? Even if you're like, we've talked about this before, it's like, okay, well, it worked last time. It's like, well, did it really work if we're in the same spot or worse? Because people say, well, I did this last time and it worked. It's like, it didn't work because we're here back at square one or worse. I don't know. Is there a square negative one? So it didn't inherently work if we weren't able to sustain it. Right. So I think we need to catch ourselves sometimes when we say, oh, this worked. And it's like, okay, well, even if that did work, technically, what are the ways that we could even improve it or enhance our overall experience so that we don't have to be off after? And like, what are the ways that we could have made it more sustainable while still seeing great progress? What are some things we were spending time and energy on that didn't actually matter that led us to feeling burnt out? When we learn these things and do the reflection, then we can better make decisions on how we want to progress on a journey.
It all comes down to personal experience. Like I can't say anything off that other than that. It's like, it's your personal experience. What did it teach you? Right? Like the fact that you might have had an all or nothing mindset now or in the past, like doesn't have to just be oh, I need to break this. It's like, well, why? Like ask yourself, like, how is it not serving you? What specific behaviors has it contributed to? And like you said, right? If you have that in the past, just say, okay, well, like what would need to be different for it to not be a restart? Right?
Yeah.
What needs to be different for you not to feel like you're restarting again? Or you're sitting here today saying you have the same goal that you had 5 years ago and that you never reached, right? What needs to be different to make that more sustainable? Or I think you can also ask yourself, like, what was the reason that you did fall off? Because let's say sometimes like you did go all in on a goal and then something happened in life that just was circumstantial, right? Sometimes that can be a little bit of, a thing that triggers people back into the nothing mode. But you have to ask yourself, is that different from like if it's a major life event that happens? Is that different than your own psychology? Is that different than the protocol you were following? Like, what is it that created that all or nothing flip flop for you?
Yeah.
And if you can understand the trigger to go back to the nothing, then you can find a solution for that trigger.
And even if you do have something that's circumstantial, like maybe you do have like a big life event that just happened, right? Life was like, hey, here you go. Here's this thing that you got to deal with. Even then, this is where the adaptability component, I know this is something you want to touch on, really comes into play because it's the ability to shift down that spectrum a little bit, but not be fully off or lower your dimmer switch, right? Like regardless of going on, it's like, okay, well, maybe we can't stick to like exactly the protocol that we were doing before based on this life circumstance, but what is the version that we can stick to?
What can we do? Yes. I love that.
What is the version that we can do? So yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
A lot of people focus on what they feel they have to do or what they have been doing or what they ideally want to be doing. That's not the same thing as what you can do. And I think I'm not trying to say lower your expectations, but I am saying manage your expectations, right? Because if you can understand like what is humanly feasible for you in when those life events happen, when, work gets insane, something happens family wise, social life happens, you go through major life changes. If you can ask yourself, okay, what can I realistically commit to? You've now flipped the switch. Instead of setting yourself up, well, I can't do the things that are the all in version, you've now said, okay, I'm adding these things in that can be productive and can be achievable. And that's a much more empowering mindset than, well, I can't do that. So that's it.
I agree.
Amazing. You talked about the dimmer switches there, right? So I think it's just like finding what is even your lowest volume to be operating at. And I often talk about fitness as like this white noise that's just always present, right? And sometimes you turn that up and it becomes like a rave or like whatever, the volume's super loud. And sometimes you turn it down and it's just like whatever helps you fall asleep at night in the lowest possible volume. But you have to understand what is that like lowest frequency that you can operate at. And that stops you from ever falling into the nothing or the off.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's good. Anything else you want to like touch on surrounding all things all or nothing?
I think we kind of like, I don't know, I can ramble about this forever. And I feel like some of my thoughts were a little disjointed in this episode. It's so individual. That's what I will say. It's so individual, which makes it hard to have a challenge about the collective all or nothing mindset because it shows up so differently from one person to the next. But if I could say anything, I would say that the main takeaways here are just like understanding if this is a pattern you find yourself falling into, what behaviors are the all for you versus which ones are the nothing, right? What have you convinced yourself needs to be true for you to be all in versus what are the triggers that make you fall into the all out or the nothing? And then also just understanding, like, if that is a pattern that has prevented you from breaking your goals, what needs to be true for you to continue consistently working towards your goals? That's what I'll say.
Yep. I agree. Cool.
Alrighty. I think we were going to wrap it up there. If you have an all or nothing mindset, or you feel like it's something you've, had in the past, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's affected you, or if you've found a way to break it. Like, share that in the comments below. We're always looking for different strategies or mindsets that people can fall back on. All right. And if you want your all or nothing mindset to, stop getting in the way of your fitness goals or stop holding you back, you know where to find us. Drop a comment, send us a DM on Instagram, and let's chat through it. All right. So without further ado, we'll leave you there for this week, and we'll be back in your feeds with another episode of Truth Talks next Monday. Bye for now.